They say you can tell how little you matter by how casually people try to erase you. My father-in-law pushed the envelope across the dining table like he was donating to a charity drive. Not even looking at me. Just slid it forward with 2 fingers. "We think this is best for everyone," he said, smiling tightly. "You've lived your little fantasy long enough. Our son deserves stability." I didn't touch the envelope. The restaurant was expensive in that way that makes you sit straighter, like you owe the furniture respect. Crystal glasses. Soft piano music. The kind of place women like me are expected to feel grateful just to be invited to. My husband's mother leaned in, her voice sweet but sharp. "It's not personal, Beta, but it's time you grow up. Love doesn't pay bills." I blinked. Once. Twice. "Dad, what is this?" my husband asked, confused, embarrassed, already shrinking the way he always did around them. No one answered him, because this wasn't about him. It was about me. "Hi. My name is Ava Shaw. I've been married for 3 years. And everyone in that room believed I was just a quiet woman with a modest tech job, cheap coffee habits, and very ordinary dreams. The kind of girl who should feel lucky she married into money. The kind you tolerate but never respect. What they didn't know, what my husband didn't even know, was that I was the silent co-founder of the very company my father-in-law sat on as a director. Every decision he'd made for 5 years, it passed through my hands first. This dinner? I requested it. This table? I chose it. And that envelope? I expected it. Still, when I finally opened it, my chest tightened. Inside was a check. $500,000. To disappear. To divorce their son quietly. To stop holding him back. To make myself small again, just somewhere else. I looked up slowly. They were watching me the way people watch a problem they think they've already solved. I folded the check carefully, slid it back into the envelope, unopened, then pushed it back toward him. My husband stared at me, then at his parents. "What the hell is this?" His father didn't blink. "Security," he said calmly. "This girl isn't your future. She's a phase." Phase. Like I hadn't cooked his meals. Like I hadn't sat on cold floors with him during panic attacks. Like I hadn't built an empire while being told to stay quiet. His mother turned to me. "Take it. Start fresh. We'll even help you relocate." I let out a soft breath. Almost a laugh. "Do you really think I married him for money?" I asked. His father leaned forward. "I think girls like you, who come from nothing, always find their way into families like ours. People like you." There it was. I smiled. Not because it was funny, but because I finally saw them clearly. I turned to my husband, my voice gentle. "I never cared about impressing them," I said. "I only wanted you to love me for who I am." He looked lost. "What are you talking about?" I reached into my bag and pulled out a business card, slid it across the table. His father's face changed the moment he saw the logo. "Our company. I've owned 49% of it," I said quietly, "since before you were even offered that director title." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was surgical. And in that moment I knew they hadn't invited me to dinner to welcome me into the family. They invited me to erase me. And I was done letting that happen. My husband looked at me like he was seeing a stranger. 49%, he whispered. "Ava, that's not funny." His mother laughed nervously, waving her hand like she could swat the truth out of the air. "That's impossible. You're just a barista?" I finished softly. "A nobody? That's what you saw because that's what I let you see." His father's face drained of color. Not anger. Not disbelief. Fear. "You're lying," he muttered. "This is some kind of bluff." I tilted my head. "Do you want me to list the articles of incorporation?" I asked. "Or should I remind you who approved your last bonus structure? Twice?" His lips parted. Nothing came out. My husband picked up the business card with shaking fingers, flipping it over like the answers might magically appear on the back. "Wait, you're a founder?" I met his eyes. I never wanted money to be the loudest thing in our marriage. The table felt smaller now. The walls closer. His father finally slammed his hand down. "If this is true," he snapped, Then why come here at all? I held his gaze. Didn't blink. Because I wanted to meet you at eye level, I said. And because I needed to know who you'd be if you thought I was beneath you. That landed. He stood up so fast his chair scraped the floor. You humiliated us. No, I said, rising slowly. You did that all by yourselves. I turned to my husband. His eyes were glassy, confused, hurt. Ready to go? I asked gently. He nodded. We walked out without another word. The car ride home was quiet in the way storms are quiet before they break. Halfway down the highway, he finally spoke. You are going to hide this from me forever? I kept my eyes on the road. No. But I wasn't going to tell you at dinner while your parents tried to buy me off like a problem employee. He looked out the window. I don't know what to feel. Start with the truth, I said. You married a woman who builds quietly, who doesn't need to announce her power to feel real. Silence again. Then softer, almost broken. You let me believe we were struggling. We weren't struggling, I replied. We were living honestly. I wanted a marriage, not a performance. That night, his father called twice. I didn't answer. Then came the email. One line. We need to talk. This affects the board. I smiled. There it was. He'd finally connected the dots. Because what he didn't realize, what he never bothered to ask, was that I didn't just co-own the company. I held the patent. The software backbone that drove their billion-dollar valuation? My name was on it. Not his. Not the board's. Mine. They tried to erase me with a check. Now they were panicking because they finally understood something powerful. Quiet women aren't weak. They're just choosing when to speak. The next board meeting was Thursday. I didn't RSVP. I showed up early. Not in a power suit. Not in heels. I wore the same gray sweater they'd always mocked when I picked my husband up from events. The one his mother once called unambitious. I wanted them to recognize me, not as an executive, but as the woman they dismissed. The moment I stepped into the glass conference room, the noise died instantly. My father-in-law sat at the head of the table. Pale. Rigid. Two directors whispered. The legal advisor looked like he'd swallowed something sharp. I took the empty seat at the far end. No greeting. No smile. They waited for me to speak. I didn't. I opened my folder and placed one page on the table. The original founder agreement. Signed by me. Co-signed by the investors. Including the clause they'd all conveniently forgotten. Veto rights. The meeting began. They went through the motions. And when the vote started on a major acquisition, one my father-in-law had already promised shareholders, I raised my hand. Vetoed. The room froze. I leaned back calmly. Now, I said, shall we talk? My father-in-law's jaw tightened so hard, I thought his teeth might crack. Ava, he said carefully, like my name was a negotiation. This acquisition is strategic. We've already announced it. You announced it, I corrected. Without consulting a co-founder. Without a board vote. And definitely without checking clause 17.3. The legal advisor shifted in his seat. He knew I was right. One of the directors leaned forward. This puts us in breach of investor disclosure laws. I nodded once. And that's exactly why I raised my hand. The room wasn't angry anymore. It was afraid. I wasn't smiling. This wasn't revenge. Revenge is loud. Sloppy. This was correction. I'm not here to sink the company, I said evenly. I'm here to remind you who's been protecting its core infrastructure while you were busy polishing titles. My father-in-law slammed his pen down. You're making this personal. No, I replied. You did. The moment you slid that envelope across the table and tried to trade your son's marriage for your illusion of control. Silence fell. Not one of them defended him. Finally, a younger board member cleared his throat. Maybe it's time we stop treating Miss Shaw like a threat and start recognizing her as a partner. I stood. Good, I said. Because starting today, I'm done being invisible. The press release went live Monday morning at exactly 9. Ava Shaw named co-CEO of Linhart Global following strategic board restructure. My phone didn't stop vibrating. Former colleagues, old classmates, even relatives who once asked my husband if he was comfortable with a wife that ambitious. Funny how ambition only becomes admirable when it's announced by a headline. I walked into headquarters without a badge. The receptionist stood immediately when she saw me step into the executive elevator. My father-in-law was already inside. 5 floors. No words. Then he said it. "You think you've won?" I didn't look at him. This was never a game.
He scoffed.
"You humiliated me." I turned then.
Calm.
Precise.
No.
You humiliated yourself the moment you confused silence with weakness. The doors opened. I stepped out first. That day, I made 2 decisions. The first, I rehired the junior development team he'd laid off for budget optics. The same team that actually understood the product. The second, I reassigned him. Non-voting advisory role. Still paid. Still present. But no longer in the room when real decisions were made. He didn't argue. Because power recognizes power. That evening, I found my husband on the rooftop. The same place we once talked about dreams bigger than rent and instant noodles. The city lights stretched out like possibilities. "You never planned to tell me," he said quietly. "Not until I knew you loved me," I replied. "Not the title. Not the name." He nodded slowly. "And now?" he asked. "Now," I said, "the name is public. But the reason it means anything is still us." He reached into his coat and pulled out the envelope. The same one from that dinner. Still sealed. "I never opened it," he said. "Didn't need to." I took it, looked at the number written to erase me, and tore it in half. Not for drama. Because it never mattered. "I'm sorry they treated you that way," he whispered. "They only saw what I let them," I replied. He smiled faintly. Still quiet. I shook my head. Not anymore. Behind us, the company lights glowed against the glass skyline. No longer hidden. No longer dismissed. I didn't need to shout to arrive. I just waited until the silence was mine to break. The fallout didn't come loud. It came slow. Emails asking for clarification. Messages from investors suddenly polite. People who had never learned my name now spelling it carefully. Power doesn't announce itself. It adjusts the room. My father-in-law avoided me after that day. When we crossed paths in the halls, he nodded, short, stiff. No lectures. No advice. Just a man realizing control is not something you inherit. It's something you earn. At home, things were quieter too. Not tense. Just honest. One night, my husband finally said what had been sitting between us. "You let them believe you were small," he said. "Why?" I thought about it for a moment. "Because the world already punishes women who take up space," I answered. I wanted to know who loved me when I didn't. He didn't argue. He just reached for my hand. Weeks later, the company stabilized. Grew stronger, actually. Turns out listening to the people who build things works better than silencing them. The board adapted, or got out of the way. I never raised my voice. Never embarrassed anyone publicly. I didn't need to. Respect followed consistency. And fear? Fear followed memory. They remembered the dinner. The envelope. The moment they misjudged the wrong woman. One afternoon, I found an old note in my desk drawer. Something I'd written years ago, before marriage, before titles. "If I ever have power, I won't use it to crush. I'll use it to correct." I smiled. Because that's exactly what I did. I still wear the gray sweater sometimes. Not because I have to, but because it reminds me who I was when no one was watching. And who I became anyway. If there's one thing this taught me, it's this. People will try to limit you when they don't understand you. They'll try to buy you off when they can't control you. And they'll panic the moment they realize you were never powerless. You were just patient. If you've ever been underestimated, if someone tried to silence you, control you, or decide your worth for you, this story is for you. Backhand index pointing right like this video if you believe quiet strength is still strength. Backhand index pointing right subscribe for more real, emotional stories where karma speaks louder than cruelty. Backhand index pointing right comment below. Have you ever been judged for being quiet? I read every single one. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply refusing to disappear.